Hey everybody, we are officially live. I am Chelsea with Pawsitive Futures, Dog Training and Behavior, and today we're coming on to give you guys yet again more free content. We're talking about some really important stuff today, our puppies and teenagers, some of the changes they go through, because let's face it, raising puppies and raising teenagers is not easy. But there's some things that we need to watch out for because some changes are normal and some are not. And we need to make sure that we're doing our part to support them through this developmental phase. And I am joined today by Camille, who I hope you recognize. Oh, she's over there. Because she works for Pawsitive Futures as well. And Katie, up here. And hopefully you guys recognize her too, because she was just on and did a fantastic chat with us about dog introduction mistakes. If you missed that, I definitely recommend it. That can be found on our Facebook and YouTube page. So today we're going to talk a little bit about our puppies and teens. Before we get started, Camille, would you like to start and give a little introduction to yourself as well as the presentations that you'll be doing at Puppy Summit?
Sure thing. Hi, I'm Camille Personne. I am a certified dog trainer. I'm also a certified behavior consultant. I am currently working for Pawsitive Futures with Chelsea. And in the two presentations I'll be doing during the virtual Puppy Summit is going to be, the first one is going to be on puppy foundation skills and kind of what important behaviors you should start with and focus on that are going to have really handy short-term uses for you, but also long-term, so that you don't feel so overwhelmed with, oh my God, there's just so much stuff I need to teach my puppy. I don't know what to do. And then we don't do anything. The second is going to be on dog teenagers and what to expect. Dogs tend to go through lots of changes when they mature. And I want to make sure that you guys know what's normal, what's not normal, and kind of how to deal, have tips and strategies on how to live with your teenagers without pulling your hair out and just wanting to strangle them, because they're a little bit challenging during that time.
A little bit challenging, just a little bit. I love when I am talking to my clients and they are, maybe feeling a little bit frustrated with their puppies, which is totally understandable because they're a ton of work. And then I'm like, oh, just wait till teenagehood. It's going to get better. And dealing with our puppies and kind of the emotional toll that can have on us is actually something that Katie, you'll be presenting a little bit on as well, right?
Yes, definitely. One of my presentations is on what people are calling the puppy blues. So it's when, you bring a puppy home and all of a sudden we have a lot of feelings that we maybe didn't expect, like depression, anxiety, etc. So as someone who is a professional, but also goes through that every time I get a puppy and knows it's coming, I'm going to go through some ways for you to work through it and when to reach out for help and kind of wear those dual mental health perspective, dog training perspective hats to kind of help get you through it.
I love that. And I think that a lot of that can be done, mental prep wise beforehand, which I think that we don't necessarily think about. But we obviously need to, hey, Aaron's tuning in and watching. We need to kind of keep an eye on that beforehand and prepare beforehand, because if we can't take care of ourselves through this process, it's really, really hard to put any more effort. And, as somebody who has an autoimmune disease, I only have a certain number of spoons a day. There's only a certain amount of things I could do. And so me knowing that will help me prepare. And even those small changes can make a really big difference in terms of me having more energy that I need to put into certain things and certain aspects about raising a puppy, as well as our multi-dog households, which I know you and I talked about earlier, but go ahead and give everybody kind of a brief intro to what they can expect for that as well.
Yeah, so in my multi-dog households presentation, I'm going to go through 6 pillars of creating a thriving multi-dog household. And I'm going to start from introductions before your dog comes home and through the rest of your lives together. It's going to be a jam-packed presentation. I'm going to get through it as quickly as possible for you. But so many of us, I think we don't understand that we need to be intentional about introducing our dogs. We need to be intentional about building relationships between them. And there's not a lot of information about how to do that. So we're going to learn a little bit about how you can do that at home.
Yeah. And if you guys want a little bit more of an in-depth teaser on that, I do recommend that you head over to our YouTube channel and check out the chat that Katie and I did the other day about dog introduction mistakes. It's really, really eye-opening. And I think it'll really help give people kind of an idea on, okay, these are the mistakes I'm making. And then they can tune into your presentation at Puppy Summit to figure out how to do it the right way.
Definitely.
And I am also presenting at Puppy Summit. I've got a preventing separation anxiety chat planned, and it actually will be applicable if your puppy is already experiencing some stress and negative associations with crates and X-Pens. Maybe they're that stereotypical Velcro puppy that won't leave your side. So whether we're starting from scratch or kind of having to unravel and go back to the basics, it will be applicable to you. And then I'm also doing a chat about one of my favorite things on the planet, which is puppy fitness and prepping our puppies for all of the awesome adventures that we want to do with them when they grow up. So we're going to talk about some safety and some easy exercises you can do at home that really combine fitness, training, socialization. It really is all connected. So we will be going through that as well. So today we're going to talk about our teenagers, and I see that Grace has joined us and she said, yes, we're going through the adolescent phase with our puppy, and I do want to pull my hair out. Grace, we get it. It is hard. So let's first start by talking about some of those changes that they go through as they move from puppies to teenagehood.
All right. So one of the things, that tends to happen, and we tend to forget because a lot of teenage dogs look adult, at least in size, or very close to adults. And so it's very easy when you look at them to forget that the brain is still puppy. They look like adults. Sometimes they'll behave like adults in the way they're moving around. They're more coordinated. They're stronger, faster. But the brain is very much still at a puppy stage. They go through lots of changes in their brains during teenagehood. Some of them is hormones regulated. Some is just normal maturation, just like we go through lots of brain changes when we get to be teenagers. So things that are pretty common amongst teenagers is a lot of arousal, right? So teenagers tend to be very impulsive, very easily excited. Everything is exciting. We don't know how to control ourselves. So we kind of lose ourselves a little bit here and there. Another thing too is usually at this age, because they're bigger and more coordinated, they tend to be bolder in general and take more risks. Hey, like human teenagers, teenage boys, am I right? So they'll do things that they didn't used to do before because now they physically can. Sometimes those are good things that we like climbing on stuff, especially if you want to do some kind of dog sports. Sometimes it's not, like when your dog takes you down a ravine to go splash into the water.
Do we have a personal experience with that?
I don't know. Did it happen to me? I'm not sure. But so generally you'll see, just bolder dogs. Their play style can also change. They tend to be a little bit more rude in their play style, a little bit more forward. Whereas with puppies, they tend to be very, submissive side. And, ooh, that was too much. And let me back up. Teenagers tend to just go at it. Bam. Oh, did I just run into you? Sorry, my bad. Let me do it again. So those are things that you typically see. You also see a lot of environmental sensitivity at that age. Puppies tend to be very handler focused because their survival depends on having an adult nearby to help them. When they're teenagers, they typically go, okay, I don't need you anymore. Let me go see everything. And so they'll be very easily distracted by everything in the environment. You become very much, their last priority. You tend to be very boring to your dog because they see you all the time. And so it can be really challenging to get them to come back when you call them, to walk on a loose leash because they want to go sniff absolutely everything. If you have teenage boys, they want to go pee on everything. Every dog, person, squirrel, bird, anything they can see is far more interesting than you and whatever you have on you. So those are, I would say, pretty much the big three main challenges that all teenagers go through. Is so that super excitable about everything. So everything we have big feelings about, being really bold and taking lots of risks that we didn't used to do before. And then just being very distracted and very interested in everything else. But, the handler.
Yeah, I think that this is a particularly challenging time. And I think that for a lot of people that are maybe just getting into dogs or kind of just learning about training, that might read or hear or see things on the internet will often misinterpret this intense and big teenage behavior as a dog trying to dominate them or trying to take charge. And I think it's really important for people to understand that's not the case. During these teenage developmental times, the part of their brain that controls drives and intensity is hyperactive. And the part of their brain that controls their ability to think, to work through complex situations, that is underdeveloped. So we've got lots of drive, lots of intensity, and little ability to control themselves. They're not trying to be malicious. They're not bad dogs. They just need a bit more patience, a bit more guidance, and oftentimes a lot more management so that we can help set up their environment at home and out in the real world so that it's conducive to learning. And that can be challenging because they are so interested in everything else around them and often less interested in what we have. So Katie, when you're working with some of these teenager dogs, what are some tools that you use to kind of help motivate them to focus on the handler and for the dog and the handler to find success instead of, just going to a park and trying to grab attention?
Well, I think you start inside, right? Let's work on attention inside. Let's review our skills inside. Let's try to bring them back out if we can. Let's find some new ways to reinforce them for good behavior that might be more powerful. Like typically we've all been using food, but can we play? Can we give them access to this thing that they want in return for sitting or giving us attention? Like I don't like to be in conflict with my teenager. Like as much as possible, I'm going to create a situation where I don't have to fight with my teenage dog. Because I look at them and I'm like, you have big feelings. I am here to help you deal with the big feelings, but we've got to get through it together. So this is around the time where if I was walking on a 6-foot lead, now I'm walking on a 10 or 12. Yeah. Always. I'm not getting in a fight about the leash. It's not worth it. No one's going to get their needs met in this way. And I think that creates a situation where a lot of people are not walking their teenage dogs.
Yep, absolutely. And then the dogs aren't getting out. They're not building positive associations with the world. And oftentimes when they're in this fear period and kind of going through these developmental changes, that consistency can be really important. It can be hard to take them out when they have big feelings, but we need to make sure we're continuing to support them through it. And I love, Katie, what you said about, finding a place where they can work, because I think that that's often hard. They think, I need to work on loose leash walking. I'm going to take my dog out, but my dog doesn't want treats. And I always try to ask them, okay, totally fine. Where can your dog take treats? And that might be inside with low distractions, and that's okay. It might be in the garden. It might be in the backyard. And that's okay. We're going to go to the place where they can take food so that we can reward them for it. And then on top of that, remember that your dog during this phase is more interested in everything else. Food might start to become a bit of a lower value reinforcer for them. Obviously, as trainers, we know that this is something we can work on. We can build drive for food. But we can also start thinking creatively and think about other things out in the world that my dog does want. So if my boy dog really wants to sniff and pee on everything, I might reward attention with go sniff. And he gets to go do that fun thing. Yeah, I use that a ton. And so by giving them access to these other things that they want, in turn, we're then making ourselves more interesting because we bring the dog or allow the dog to have what they want.
Yeah, and I think too, like some of the things you have to remember when a teenager is short-term versus long-term, and knowing that it's a phase and that it would kind of, if you keep on track, it'll just kind of resolve itself anyway. A great example is the loose leash walking. With my teenagers, do I care about perfect loose leash walking? Not at all. Because we've had the foundations as puppy. I know my dog knows it. I know it's going to come back once that, oh my God, everything is exciting, I need to pee on everything phase stops. So am I going to struggle and force my dog to walk into a heel and turn every walk into this super frustrating exercise for both me and my dog, because I don't like having my shoulder wiped out and my dog is being frustrated because they can't do what they want to do? Or am I going to relax my criteria a little bit and maybe we'll have a little bit of pulling, maybe we'll have less engagement, but long term, I'm still building that relationship with my dog and they see me as a provider of good things. Like I love being with my human because we always do fun stuff instead of my human is just a pain in my butt because they keep preventing me from doing what I want. You're nagging them all the time. And then over the long term, it just diminishes your relationship with your dog. And then you run into issues when they're adults because you've set yourself up as being the naggy, annoying, not motivating person to be around, versus being a little bit more flexible with our standards when they're teenagers, but still kind of working on that overall relationship, and that, being together and working together is what we want to do. And it's fun and it's rewarding in kind of every aspect.
Yeah. One thing I really like to remind people, we need to be careful on language that we used. I think oftentimes when we talk about this teenager phase, people think, okay, well, it's a phase, they'll just grow out of it. And that's true to some extent, but we also, like, at the end of the teenager phase, this imbalance in, intensity and drive. Oh, we lost Camille. This intensity in, impulsive and drive versus their ability to make good choices. Like, eventually that will balance out, but it's not like we can just let the dog do what they want and hope they come through it on the other side. We need to make sure that we're still supporting them. And I think that I like to relax criteria during this time and focus on some of the basics. How easy is it for me to live with my teenager at home? And, how fun is it for the dog to work with me? Because like you said, Katie, we don't want that conflict. I don't want my dog to look at me and think this is not exciting.
Right. I think people really struggle with unhooking themselves from this idea that if you allow it now, if you let your dog walk on a long leash now, or you let your dog pull now, that it means you're doomed to have it forever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not always true with some of these choices that we make.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, we need to focus kind of actually what our talk was about yesterday when I had Erin and Becca on: communication, clear communication from us to the dog, making sure that we're consistent in what we're asking for, that we're generous with that reinforcement, and that we're doing our best to kind of keep ourselves composed so that when our teenager does make a mistake, which is going to happen, we're prepared to kind of laugh, take a deep breath, and go, all right, how can we switch this up so this isn't going to happen again? And learning from those oops moments.
Yeah, I think you definitely have to laugh at your teenager or you're going to cry,
Yeah. And I think that the more dogs we have in the house, the more other animals we have in the house, the more people we have in the house, that can change teenager time significantly. I know that both of my boys were challenging teenagers. But having one teenager in the house was a lot easier for me than when I had two adults and a teenager in the house. That changes that dynamic and that energy in the house quite a bit. So Katie, as our kind of expert on multi-dog household and multi-dog relationships, how do you kind of help that teenager through this time while also keeping your other household dogs in mind? Because teenagers can bring some conflict with their intensity.
I think if you weren't already using management in your house, like gates and such, and dividing your house into zones so everyone can have a break, it's time to do it. And if you had a puppy and things were going great and you pulled it down, you need to put it back up in most cases, just for everyone's sanity. And I'm not just talking about the dogs, I'm actually talking about you. I don't think most of us have gotten dogs and want to make that our 24/7 job. I mean, maybe some of us do because we chose to be dog trainers, but I
with the exception of the people on this screen.
But you're like your average pet owner. I don't want you to have to play dog bouncer and dog referee all day. The other thing to keep in mind is, like, you're going to have these constant play attempts from these adolescent dogs, and it is very hard for them to hit the brakes on their own.
Oh, yes.
And it can be very irritating for your older dogs. So I really spend a lot of time teaching people how to intervene and how to do so kindly, right? Because we don't want to be yelling at the dogs. We don't want to be grabbing dogs and having to pull them out of situations constantly. Again, it's another, I don't want a conflict with my teenage dog. And I also don't want to create negative associations between my dogs, that these interactions create yelling or other stressful things. So, use trained skills.
Yeah.
separate them. The other thing I see a lot is stealing items. You know, we don't have boundaries anymore. It's like, I want that, I'm going to take it. And you know, if you have a house where you have a little bit of resource guarding going on, that's definitely like a worrisome scenario. You also don't want it starting to become a long-term problem. So in my house, dogs don't steal from each other. Like if there are resources out, I am supervising. If one dog goes to take a resource, I am going to help that dog get that item back. I do not want my dogs to work it out. I don't want to see what decisions they're going to make. It's not necessary. And you know, if you intervene enough times, or if you learn to intervene when you see the adolescent dog approaching the adult dog with an item, they start to learn, oh, hey, you know, I just can't have that. I have to have this different thing. And it's okay to remove a dog who is just continually breaking boundaries. You know, we don't want to get in this loop. It's not about punishing them. It's not like you're angry or anything like that. It's just, I'm going to put you in a different space and I'm going to give you something appropriate to do, because this isn't working for anyone. And that's going to kind of protect these relationships that you've built so far and keep problems from developing between your dogs.
Yeah, those positive interrupters are essential. When we were raising our oldest now, who is our youngest, good grief, but he's like 6 now. So he's not a puppy, not a teenager. But when he was going through his teenage phase, we lovingly called him the Energizer Bunny, because he just would go, 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 go. He had no off switch, right? And so even if everybody else in the household was relaxing, he was walking around looking for something to do. And this is very normal for our teens. They have more energy and less of the ability to find that off switch. And so for our older dogs, you know, we want to make sure that the younger dogs aren't constantly pestering them. So in my house, we started, you know, I would make a silly noise, grab attention, call him away, redirect him to something else. But we want to implement that, you know, 3 strikes and you're out. If I have to do that 3 times in a row, I got to change something, because I don't want them continuing to practice that, because it's going to become a behavior loop. You know, they're going to keep getting enjoyment and entertainment. So I need to figure something else out to help everybody relax. Could be as easy as an X pen or a baby gate. Maybe the teenagers had enough and they need a nap with a frozen Kong or something. But, you know, getting in there and intervening early and doing it in a positive way is going to help you keep your sanity. It's going to help that teenager learn some boundaries that are really important, but in a kind way that don't cause conflict between the dogs or between us and the dog.
Yeah, and you can also, I think I'd like people to put more thought into the time that their adult dogs and adolescent dogs spend together. Let's look at all of our dogs and ask ourselves, have we met these dogs' needs today? Because have we met these needs before we put them in a space together? We want them all to be their best selves. I want that adolescent dog to be relatively tired. I want to bring them together in a space with a plan. What are we doing? And usually with an adolescent dog, that is a calm activity that I'm not asking for if I haven't met that dog's needs for mental or physical enrichment that day. You know, you can't just expect these things. So you know, you bring the adolescent dog in, you set up your environment. I've got comfy dog beds. I've got the TV going. My dogs know, you know, we're sitting on couches, we're watching TV. It's calm. I've got bones. I've got Kongs. So just kind of help them have the interactions you want them to have.
I think that's so key too, because when we look at these multi-dog households, we think, you know, I want my dogs to be able to play. I want them to enjoy their company. And I totally agree. We do. But oftentimes that teenager behavior can be a bit intense for older dogs. So we need to make sure if it is happening, it's supervised and it's in short spurts. Because it can get inappropriate fast. And more so, what we want from our dogs when we're in the home together is for them to like ignore each other, for them to just chill out and be good, quiet, calm dogs. But that can take a lot of practice. And we absolutely have to make sure that we're setting the dogs up for success, because if they've got any of them, the older dogs or the teenager, if they've got, you know, energy still inside them with needs that haven't been met, that's going to be impossible to ask our teenagers to stay slow. Now, on the flip side of that, we do sometimes need our dogs to have social time, and that can get more challenging when they're in that teenager phase, because like we've mentioned, they don't all appreciate the boldness and maybe the no boundaries play style of a teenager. So Camille, I know you do puppy play group for us. You went through this with your boy recently, who was a teenager and was able to interact. So how do we start to navigate group play? And what does group play really look like for our teenagers? Oh, and we can't hear you, Camille. Da-da-da. Nope. I know before you were doing it without your earbuds, so maybe we'll try. You can try unplugging them. My goodness, my words are not coming to me today.
Too much talking over too many days.
I know, too much talking, too much talking. While we're hanging out for Camille to figure out her tech, Kristen said, we hit the nail on the head with the adult and teenager pups. I guess I just assumed that they'd be best buds and it would happen naturally. And that's common. That can happen when we're trying to navigate those multi-dog households. You know, we want them to play, but oftentimes them getting along and that play, just like that structured quiet time, takes a little bit more involvement from us. Right,
Definitely. Katie? Yeah. Interruptions help. So anything you can do to call them out for training. If it's safe with your dogs, you can do food scatters. So they're snuffling around in the grass and taking that break. Anything you can do to kind of moderate that arousal level before it tilts into a problem.
Yeah. And Camille, do we have you back with us yet? No. Oh. I'm going to X on you, Camille, and see if you can rejoin. All right. Hopefully we'll get her back here in just a minute and we'll talk to her about group play, yay or nay, because that is a serious challenge when we are dealing with our teenagers. And oftentimes during this phase, that's when our dog parks and our big group play and daycares can start to become a problem. And it's confusing for us because we think my dog has all of this energy. I need to get this energy out. And that's true. But we need to make sure that that energy is coming out in appropriate ways. And for our teenagers who have trouble controlling themselves, that is hard. All right, Camille, do we have you? Oh, good grief. We still don't have you. Well, we'll see if we can get her figured out with her sound over there. We'll move on and we'll come back to her for our group play. So something else that we want to think about when we're talking about our teenagers is definitely whether or not we have kids in the house or whether or not we have other animals in the house like cats, because this desire to chase, this desire to drive forward can be a little bit more intense. So that's definitely where our management comes into play more. And I love the word that you used, Katie, about being intentional about interactions. And this is so important. So I like to try to think about what I want the end goal to look like, you know, which is often, you know, maybe a kid playing on the ground on a mat on the other side of the room and the dog is laying on their bed, nice and quiet, you know, and then we have a little bit of management between those two setups and we're helping the teenager learn through training and reinforcement what we want in those specific setups.
Yeah, definitely anything we can do to create parallel activities. You know, everyone is enjoying themselves in the same relative space, but separately, it's going to make your life way easier. I think sometimes, especially in dog cat households, when you bring in a puppy, we'll see older cats maybe playing with the puppy and almost, you know, doing wrestling type things. But we know later we're going to have this huge size difference where this isn't going to work. You know, it might be dangerous by accident.
Yeah. And with our teenagers who can't control themselves, you know, that intervention is really important. But I like to, as much as possible, I mean, remember that behaviors that get rehearsed, behaviors that are fun and pleasing and exciting for our teenagers are going to happen again. And their ability to control themselves is not there. And so we have to be super, super careful about what behaviors we're allowing to get rehearsed during this time.
Definitely.
All right, Camille, do we have you? No, we don't have you.
Oh no.
Well, and it was working at the beginning. I wonder what happened. Well, feel free to keep making noises, Camille, as you try to figure out the tech on your end. So one of the things, Katie, that I know you're going to talk about in your presentation is about puppies, but it's kind of about gauging our emotions around our puppies and trying to make sure that we're fueling ourselves up as people. But I think that that's also really important when our puppies grow into teenagers, because our patience gets tested, their energy requirements increase.
Yes.
So how do you try to keep kind of a positive mindset and keep yourself fueled up as a human as you're trying to care for your teenager?
Yeah, I mean, just like our dogs, we have to meet our own needs, right? And so make sure you're eating, make sure you're taking a shower. If are a social person and you have been spending so much time with your dog that you have not been out with your human friends, take a break. I give you permission to take a break. Carve out dog-free time if you need it.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. It's okay to put your dog in a crate with something to do. It's perfectly fine. Also, just finding ways where you can enjoy your dog.
Yeah, that's huge.
And that can be hard when they're teenagers because, a lot of times I've seen difficulties in arousal, like even if we try to play with toys or if we try to go on a walk. But, any game you can find that you can enjoy together is a good thing.
Yeah.
But definitely do not skip taking care of yourself to take care of your dog. And I know that can be hard, especially because, some of you may have ended up with dogs who have behavior challenges that you were not ready for.
Mm-hmm.
And, it makes sense for you to be having a hard time. And I think you have to leave space and look at your feelings non-judgmentally. You don't need to feel like a bad person if you are not enjoying your dog right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Teenagers are tough and they definitely test our patience. And during teenager time, I tend to kind of slow things down, go back to the foundations, go back to areas where both the dog and I can be successful, because that's going to make it fun. That's going to build that relationship and really build that connection that you and your dog have. And yes, your dog has a higher energy requirement, but don't feel like you got to run it out of them. I often find that as our teenagers start looking like adult dogs, we forget that physically they kind of are still puppies. For a lot of our teenagers, growth plates aren't closed. We still have to be careful about what kinds of exercises that they're engaging in. And then on top of that, they've got so much arousal. So if I'm spending a lot of my day, physically exercising them, doing high excitement things like fetch and frisbee and running, not only is that going to have a physical toll on them, but think about the behavior they're practicing. They're getting more time practicing high arousal activities, which oftentimes that's not what we want them to be doing. That's the kind of stuff that comes easy for them. So I think trying to balance that, getting them exercise and having fun with them and not, overdoing it, is really, you got to fine tune it and you got to keep working at it for each dog.
Definitely. I think nose work is a really great activity, I think, for our teen dogs, if you can get into it, because you can start it at home. You don't even need to leave your house and they will get tired.
Yeah, absolutely. And Camille, I think we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
You're back.
Magic. All right. Don't touch anything. So we were talking about exercise and how generally during teenage times, their exercise requirements increase, but we don't necessarily want them always engaging in high arousal activities because it builds their ability to do that more, right? They're building endurance and they're practicing more high arousal things. And that kind of leads us back to what I wanted to talk to you about, which is that group play. Because oftentimes they're ability to control themselves and maybe play appropriately decreases during this teenager time. And so we can start to see some fights break out at places like dog parks and daycare if the arousal level is too high. So how do you balance letting them kind of keep that sociability, allow them to get some exercises, but make sure that they're not becoming bullies or, getting into those negative association moments with other dogs?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, part of it is setting up the playtime appropriately. So I usually will exercise or, do some kind of mentally and physically demanding activity with my dog before they're released to play, so that we don't have this huge, ginormous bell of energy and unleash it on all of the poor of the dogs. A lot of times we'll also practice calmness. So I might have my teenager on leash and we might go for a walk with our friends first so that we can kind of interact, but at a distance, and kind of do nice, oh, say hi, okay, let's walk away. Oh, say hi, let's walk away. And once everybody's a little bit more settled, okay, now we can play. I think also with teenagers, especially if you have intact teenagers, being very selective and choosy of who they play with. When they're being teenagers, they lose their puppy licenses, so other dogs will respond to them differently, especially if they're intact, and especially with intact males. So intact males can be extremely social and well behaved, but will get really negative responses from other dogs, especially neutered males will pick on them pretty much all the time. And that can set up situations where your teenager then has to escalate and posture to respond to that other male, which is not something we want to do. We really don't want our teenage males to try, oh, look at me, I'm a big dog.
Yeah.
And in the habit that works really well. So a lot of times my teenager will only get to play with dogs that he's already played with as a puppy, because they already have an ongoing relationship. And I know that's not going to change based just on hormones alone. Or I'll kind of test the dogs, and see through walks or through like protected contact. Can we say hi through a fence and kind of see how everybody does? If everybody's nice and loose and relaxed, let's play a little bit on leash so we can very easily move everybody away if we kind of start to see a little bit of tension or posturing going on. And if I see any posturing, nope, we're not doing it. I take my dog away right away. I don't let them work it out, because it's never going to work out.
Yeah.
What you want, how do you want to work out, and your dog is only learning, your teenager is only learning that being rude, pushy, and posturing is an appropriate way to deal with other dogs, especially unfamiliar dogs. And that's not something that I want my dog to learn. I want them to retain this very puppy, optimistic, everybody loves me kind of qualities, which, when our teenagers is annoying, because they'll just, hey, we're friends, right? And I don't know you. But when they mature into adulthood, they'll kind of keep that everybody is my friend, and they won't take offense to other dogs. They'll kind of get, even if they do get in the spot of trouble, they'll go, oh, I'm sorry, and they'll bounce really quickly, versus if they start practicing those really tough behavior patterns of posturing and scuffles, and if I pin you down then I win the fight, then they'll start doing it pretty regularly to every dog, and that's just not something that, obviously no one wants that to happen. So making sure setting up the session for success by kind of having slow introductions or getting your dog a little bit tired so that they're not just exploding with energy. Keeping to really well-known dogs, familiar dogs that already have a history playing with your dog, so that they understand each other, they can communicate way better. And honestly, sometimes just walks together. If my teenager is really over the top and they're not going to play well, or I don't know the dog, or we don't have access to safe dogs and my dog can play with, let's go for walks together. And we'll just walk next to each other. Maybe we'll sniff, maybe we won't, but that's still a social interaction for your dog. Sometimes we'll go on nice trails that have other dogs around. If my dog isn't in that crazy over arousal, I need to yell at everything we see. And that's a social outing, because they get to see other dogs, they get to see other people, and there's no, face-to-face interactions or up-close interactions, so we don't get to practice just, tomfoolery, just bad decisions.
Tomfoolery. That is the best word ever. I love that though, because, you have an intact boy who is very social. I do as well. It's something that we need to practice, this idea of keeping dogs social. And it doesn't mean free for all play all the time. It doesn't mean going to the dog park. It means being very careful about these experiences that they're having and making sure that you're protecting them. We don't want them to get told off by another dog because we let them run into a park and they ran in guns a-blazing and the dog was like, holy cow, that's really offensive. Get off me. I don't want any of this, and I don't want my dog getting yelled at by another dog because I don't want them building those negative associations. So being very careful about who you're allowing your dog to interact with. And a lot of the times during this teenager phase, it can mean that the interactions are group walks with friends, because sometimes giving them other things to pay attention to, sniffing, peeing where the other dog in front of you peed. Oh, look, there's a squirrel. Oh, my mom gave me a cookie for attention. All of these other things help take the pressure off of dog.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of times our teenagers, when they come into play, they're like, hello, I am here. Right? And they're staring and they're intense and they're stiff and they're up. And that can be really off-putting for a lot of dogs because it's giving that body language of intensity. But so kind of taking that step back from that.
Yeah. Another thing that too, I want to mention too, is that, when dogs are getting into teenager and sexual maturity, it's also pretty common for them to change their play styles and their social tolerance to the dogs. So puppies are, everybody's my friend. I want to play with everybody. No distinction. Anything that moves is a toy we can play with. And for, vast majority of dogs, when they get closer to adulthood, that tends to change. They don't want to be friends with everybody they meet. So they'll start being more selective about the types of dogs they want to play with. Sometimes it's a type of dog and you can clearly tell what type of dogs they like. So my previous dog loved bigger intact males, never had a problem with any of them. Smaller dogs were tough for her. We had to be really careful about introduction, especially with other females. And then sometimes it's a type of play. So they don't really care what a dog looks like, but they very clearly prefer one type of play. And they won't do well with dogs that don't play by those rules or don't play that way. And they'll get really flustered and frustrated. So that's something to keep in mind. Your dog simming is not broken. There's nothing wrong with them because now they're not the puppy social, I love everybody. It's completely normal, just like us. When we're adults, I don't want to be friends with everybody I meet on the street. Some people are like, yeah, oh, wow, were you cool? Yeah, let's be friends. But most of the time, hi, I have my friends. That's enough. And the same thing happens to dogs. So I think, because we tend to want to have social dogs, like get along with everybody, that we put a lot of pressure on our dogs to be hyper social. And we set them up to fail because we kind of keep forcing them to have interactions with dogs that they don't want to interact with. And then they have to escalate their body language to make it very clear, I don't want to deal with that dog. And the only way the human will listen is if I lunge, bark, snarl, bite, starts fights, et cetera, et cetera. So you do want to take that into account too, that, your dog might not want to socialize with other dogs. Actually, they might just be fine with the friends they already have, or watching dogs from a distance, and that play is not needed to maintain good social skills or to give your dog social enrichment whatsoever.
Yeah. And some dogs, as we are kind of entering maturity, we might start to see some reactivity pop up during this teenager phase. Maybe we go through a fear period. And so it's always really important to be mindful of the dog in front of you and observe them every day, because the dog you have today might not be the dog you had 3 weeks ago. And that's okay. You just need to figure out what they're communicating to you through their body language and help support them through it. And they don't necessarily need a bunch of dog friends to live a good life. There are so many dogs that I see as adults that really don't want any other dog friends, and that's okay. We need to make sure that we're supporting what that individual needs in their life and meeting those needs appropriately. So one of the things that we focus on with our teenagers as well is kind of building those foundations. And we talked about with our teenagers how sometimes success can be hard to find because we think that, they used to be able to do a loose leash walk and now they can't, or maybe they're a little less interested in food. So Camille, I know you're going to be talking more about this at Puppy Summit, but talk to us a little bit about how you look at your teenagers in terms of building foundations and what you might consider or not consider kind of essential for their skill set.
Yeah, so I would say, most obedience tasks, so sits, down, stays, loose leash walking, like a strict, really loose leash walk, those are kind of very flexible and fluctuating when my dogs are teenagers. So if they can't do them or don't seem to be able to do them, usually I'll just brush it off as, okay, today we can't sit. That's fine. We'll try again tomorrow. Things that I really insist on or really spend time working on are calmness, being able to settle, being able to watch things from a distance or close by, being calm, just hanging out, going places too. So I really like for my teenagers, even though they might be in that little bit hyperarousal, reactive phase, I still try to take my dog out on a field trip. So sometimes I adjust it by going to really quiet places or very familiar places where I know my dog is going to be really comfortable because he's been there a million times. And something we'll practice, can we just hang out and watch things go by and then go back home? Can we walk a little bit and see what we got? So I think a lot of it too is being flexible and, working with the dog you have that day. Just like a couple of weeks ago, Chelsea and I did a photo shoot and Cole could not sit for the life of him. He did one sit and that was it. He never got another sit. He was like, what? I don't know.
I don't know that I've never had any training.
What's the point? It's not going to happen. I'm just going to nag my dog. Okay, can we do it down instead? Can we stay instead? Can we just hang out? And I think kind of being flexible with those, criteria and just being like, okay, does it really matter that my dog is sitting? No, it really doesn't. Does it matter that my dog is not losing its mind and pulling me and lunging left and right? Yes, but that's calmness. That's not a sit stay or down stay or a stand stay. So I work more on those big concepts and kind of state of mind versus actual, very small and particular specific behavior skills or obedience skills, just because that's where you start pulling your hair out because you're waiting for the sit. The sit is not going to happen today, no matter what you do. Cheese, toys, squirrels, nope, not going to happen. Okay, let's move on. Let's try something else. Maybe it's time to go home. And some of it too is, okay, maybe my dog is overstimulated, maybe it's too much. And then we just go home and give my dog a rest and then we'll try another day. So I think, being flexible with that is important. That doesn't mean that I'm just going to be like, oh, well, my dog doesn't know how to sit anymore and that's totally fine. And then you don't have to ever sit again. We'll try again in a different environment. We'll try again at a different time. We'll try again with a lower criteria. Can I use higher value treats maybe to motivate you? So we'll still try to work through the why we're not sitting today, but I'm not going to get stuck in that moment on I need to sit right now and we're not going to do anything else until you sit because that's not productive and it's not going to go anywhere. And again, then you're setting up yourself for conflict and your dog sees you as the party pooper who keeps getting them to do stuff that's really just boring. And why do I have to sit right now? I just want to sniff. And just being flexible and kind of going with the flow. Sometimes it's just easier. And then, the next time you ask for a sit, you're more likely to get it too, because you kind of give your dog a little bit of wiggle room with it. So I would say, the big ones are more like big concept of, walking on the leash. You can't lunge at people and dogs. Okay, that's a given because that's just not doable. And you can't take my shoulder out. Does the leash have to be exactly loose? And do you have to be by my side the entire time? No. As long as those rules are abide by, you can, again, you're flexible. You can kind of move around and do stuff. And if we're in a place where you can't walk without taking my shoulder out or lunging and barking at things, then maybe today is not the day to go for a walk and we'll try again tomorrow, or we'll try again in a different location.
Yeah. I find that my training with teenagers, and when I work with my clients on it, tends to look really boring. And it looks like nothing's happening, because we go to a park and I sit on the bench and I capture behavior.
Yeah.
And they're like, but we're not doing anything. And I'm like, oh, you're doing a ton. You're letting your dog observe the world around them. You're building positive associations with, new environments and new sounds still. You're rewarding attention. You're rewarding stillness. You're far enough away that your dog's big feelings aren't going to be overwhelming, And so I think that kind of focusing on those life skills and the ability to just be is often overlooked, but it's essential for me, because if my dog can't go somewhere and be chill and be focused, there's no way I'm going to be able to get loose leash walking down the road or a good recall, or, be able to go hiking with friends or do dog sports, right? It's that essential idea of, we're going to go somewhere and can you focus on me? And isn't this fun? And just because you're focusing on me and giving me attention doesn't mean you don't get to see the world around you, because that's an important part of being a dog too.
Yeah, I think when we know that our dogs are struggling to give us the behaviors that we're asking for, it's much easier to say, okay, instead I am going to look at you and I am going to reinforce these good choices that you are making.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important. It's important to capture those good behaviors and figure out, again, back to that common thread of where can your dog be successful? What can your dog do? Pay him for it.
And that's what, it's also nice to have those nice, puppy foundations, because then your dog knows. And so then you don't have to be like, oh my God, my dog doesn't know. No, they know how to sit. Just right now, there's things happening and it's not happening right now. And then you can much easier to go, okay, let's capture whatever you offer me that I like, you'll get paid for. Gets a lot easier. And then you'll find too that your dog starts offering way more because they go, whoa, can I get bonus cookies for just doing this stuff? And you're not even asking me. And you're like, that's right. And then teenagers, because, they're kind of trying to manipulate the environment a bit and see what happens when they do stuff. They're like, wait a minute, if I sit, oh, you give me a cookie. You didn't even ask me. What if I down? And then they'll get into the habit of offering stuff without you having to ask, because it's paying them. And because you're not getting that confrontation of, sit, I don't want to. And then it gets, to be like a big conflict with, whereas, if you just wait them out and just hang out, they'll just do the sit anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, kind of going back to not creating conflict. Don't make something a problem. Yeah, exactly. So Katie and Camille and myself will all be presenting on some topics at Puppy Summit. I've included a link for you guys. I do recommend you check it out. We are 3 of 12 amazing, 13 trainers that are going to be presenting 18 hours of learning content for less than a single lesson. It is absolutely worth it. And if you guys have been tuning into some of our presentations that we've been doing, some of our live events here, they're pretty talented people. So you're going to learn a lot. And I know it's a lot to learn all in one weekend. So don't be alarmed. You have access for an entire year. Really, really going to be worth it. Any last minute tips or, tricks on our puppies and teenagers that either you, Katie, or Camille want to share with our viewers?
I have one for your multi-dog household.
Awesome.
So
let's hear it.
Just be aware that your relationships between your dogs are going to change as they enter adolescence and as we approach that complete social maturity. So, be ready to respond to those things. Yeah. And don't assume it's going to stay one way.
Teenagers are like this.
And management is your best friend. Management. If your dog is struggling, managing the environment goes a long way, because you're kind of giving them access only to good choices instead of fighting with them to, bring them in. So, okay, obviously you can't handle this. Let's go take a nap in the crate with a yummy, yummy chew. And then everybody gets a nice, relaxing time, take a break from each other, and then everybody's refreshed and it's a lot easier to do stuff.
Yeah. And I know that there is always some resistance. A lot of our clients have, these beautiful open floor plan homes, or, maybe we're in an apartment, we don't have a ton of space. And I totally get how, frustrating it can be for us to be setting up these big X pens. I have Malamutes. I get it. They're large. Their X pens are large, but setting that management up now is going to be so important, because you're giving your dog chances to only rehearse desired behavior. It takes away conflict. It prevents you from becoming a bad guy, from constantly grabbing them or redirecting them. It helps them, really only rehearse the behaviors we want, which gives us a chance to pay. And if you keep paying those good behaviors, that's what you're going to come out with on the other side of this teenager phase, is all of the good. So I promise you, if you're resistant to management, it's absolutely worth it. If you do need a little help with helping your dog learn management and learn how to accept management, we do have some videos on that on our YouTube page. And actually, that is a topic I will be presenting at Puppy Summit. So we hope that you guys will join us there. And Kristen, I see, please include your links in the comments. I absolutely will drop those there and edit this once we are no longer live, to make sure that you have all the links that you will need to Katie's business page and our Puppy Summit info. All right, everybody, thanks so much for joining, and I hope you have an awesome Thursday.